Jan Pietrzak was forced to watch his wife, Quiana, be violated by 4 men. Afterward, the newly married couple was shot in the head. It was a premeditated attack, fueled by greed, hatred, and anger. The brutal case of Jan and Quiana Pietrzak remains one of the most savage murders in recent memory. Jan Paweł Pietrzak was born on March 13, 1984, in Vallow, Poland. In 1994, when he was just 10 years old, Jan's family emigrated to the United States, settling in the neighborhood of Bensonhurst in Brooklyn, New York. In 2003, Jan joined the US Marines, becoming a helicopter mechanic, and was sent to Iraq. When Jan returned after a tour, he went to a party in 2005 dedicated to Marines being deployed in Iraq. There, he met Quiana Jenkins, a worker for the local Black Infant Care Center. Initially, Quiana was hesitant to date a Marine, but thanks to Jan's perseverance, he won her over. The couple started dating, and by August 8, 2008, they had married and purchased a home in Winchester, conveniently located near Jan's station. Jan remained in the Marine Corps, where he continued working as a helicopter airframe mechanic at the Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. Unfortunately, their idyllic suburban married life was about to be cut short, just 67 days after they tied the knot. On October 15, 2008, a group of men entered Jan and Quiana's home despite the security measures that he had in place. A short conflict arose, and the couple was bound with duct tape and gagged. Quiana was tortured and physically violated by the 4 men who committed unthinkable acts on her. All the while, they forced Jan to watch the horror they inflicted on his wife. Afterward, the newlywed couple was shot in the back of the head, execution style. When the two failed to report to their workplace, Riverside Sheriff's deputies conducted a welfare check. But when they arrived at the Pietrzak residence, they found Jan and Quiana's lifeless bodies. Their home was ransacked. The authorities immediately conducted an investigation. The Naval Criminal Investigation Service, or NCIS, became involved in the case. Based on their investigative findings, particularly the different footprints at the crime scene, they concluded that there were at least 3 people involved in the crime. They also found that there were attempts to burn Jan and Quiana's home, possibly to destroy the evidence. Although Jan and Quiana were shot multiple times, there were no shell casings left behind at the crime scene. There was no murder weapon either. Authorities concluded that the killers either used a revolver or that they actually took the time to pick up the shell casings. There were also items missing, such as Quiana's jewelry, engagement ring, ATM card, and jewelry box. Jan's necklace and expensive watch were also stolen. The investigators examined Jan and Quiana's bodies, both of which had signs of torture. Jan was discovered with a sock forcibly placed in his mouth, secured by tape wrapped around his head. Upon inspection, the authorities found distinct shoe imprints on his torso and back, a disturbing testament to the severity of the stomping he endured. These brutal indications led investigators to conclude that the crime was fueled by intense anger. Still, the identities of the killers remained unknown. But then, a breakthrough happened. The involvement of the NCIS in the investigation led to an intriguing discovery in the couple's ransacked bedroom. A duffel bag. While it might appear ordinary to an outsider, within the Marine Corps, this item carries a different significance and is commonly referred to as a sea bag. The authorities concluded that the reason this bag was left untouched pointed toward the likelihood of the perpetrators being part of the Marine Corps themselves. As the authorities compared notes with each other, another big break came in. Video footage of someone using Quiana's ATM card at around 3:20 a.m. near Camp Pendleton. The person was wearing a blue bandana to cover his face and gloves to hide his fingerprints. This evidence, coupled with the footprints found at the crime scene, gave the investigators a clear direction. they began questioning the people at Jan's workplace. Interviewing two of his friends, the investigators realized that Jan was an open book. He often shared everything, as he was proud of Quiana and the life that they had built together, even mentioning to some that he received a $30,000 re-enlistment bonus. He also told some people that he kept the money inside his home near Camp Pendleton. This was a strong enough motive for the robbery. However, there was another potential motive. At his workplace, Jan was known for being a strict disciplinarian. In the Marine Corps, there are certain Marines called hard changers. These were the superiors that could be likened to terror teachers. Jan's working style and personality rubbed people the wrong way. In fact, Jan shared with one of his friends that there was an insubordinate junior Marine. His name was Lance Corporal Tyrone Miller. It seemed that Miller held a deep hatred toward Jan. Upon learning about the couple's deaths, he expressed regret about Quiana's fate, but his apathy for Jan's death was apparent. Furthermore, Miller was suspected to be involved in a gang. This was underlined by an incident where he was the victim of a drive-by shooting near Camp Pendleton. On October 28th, investigators interrogated the 20-year-old husband and father. Skilled detective work prompted Miller to confess certain details. He admitted to passing by Jan and Quiana's residence on his way to meet friends for drinks around the time of the murders. He also acknowledged that he was wearing Nike Air Force One shoes, the same type that matched the footprints discovered at the crime scene. However, what solidified his position as the prime suspect was his admission of wearing blue bandanas while out with friends. The authorities released him, but they obtained a search warrant for his house later. When the police arrived to search his residence, Miller didn't cooperate. The police were forced to ram through his house. Miller then picked up his daughter and raised her in the air, basically using her as a human shield against the police. Thankfully, they managed to make Miller comply, securing him and his wife. When the search of Miller's house began, they found damning evidence. Quiana's ATM card was on top of the table, while Jan's uniform was hanging inside Miller's room. Shell casings that completely matched the number of rounds used to execute Jan and Quiana were also found in a plastic bag. Then, inside a black backpack, blue bandanas and gloves similar to the ones seen in the video footage. With implicating evidence presented against him, Miller began to talk, pointing to 3 other Marines involved in the crime while minimizing his role in the slayings. He mentioned Emrys John, who also worked under Jan, and Kevin Cox, an electrical technician in the same squadron. As the investigators dug deeper, they discovered a 4th Marine, Keyshawn Sykes, a clerk in an artillery squadron. The authorities learned that the 4 had been leading double lives. They were Marines by day, but criminals and burglars by night, committing home invasions regularly. Additionally, the 4 tried to pass the crime off as an act of racism, spray painting racial slurs in the house in an attempt to misdirect investigators. However, investigators uncovered that John posted in his MySpace page before the slayings, "Chillin' waitin' for the killin'." This further implicated them of premeditated murder. All of the suspects were brought in for questioning, but everyone denied their involvement. Still, the authorities were able to piece together the real story. In the early morning of October 15th, Miller, Sykes, Cox, and John attempted to infiltrate Jan and Quiana's home. Everyone, with the exception of Cox, wore bandanas and gloves. After failing to gain entry, they sent Cox to knock, banking on Jan recognizing him and opening the door. When Jan answered, they stormed him at gunpoint. They ransacked his home, but couldn't locate the money Jan had allegedly spoken about. As a result, the 4 men resorted to torturing the couple, coercing them into revealing Quiana's ATM pin. Based on their investigation, the authorities concluded that Miller orchestrated the entire plot, leading to the tragic deaths of Jan and Quiana. The 4 men were tried, and after 4 months, the jury finally reached their verdicts. The ex-Marines were found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, among other charges. Emrys John, identified as the actual gunman, was convicted. Tyrone Miller was found guilty of sexual assault. Keyshawn Sykes was convicted on charges of both sexual assault and robbery. For their crimes, John, Miller, and Sykes were all given the death penalty. In contrast, Kevin Cox deals with a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Specifically, on July 19, 2013, the court passed the death sentence for Miller. Then, on August 16, 2013, it was John's turn to receive his death sentence. On the same day, Cox was given 2 life terms without parole. The jury decided against the death penalty for Cox, taking into account that he was less implicated in the crime, largely following orders from the other 2 Marines who outranked him. Finally, on November 7, 2014, Keyshawn Sykes was sentenced to death. Even though justice prevailed in the end thanks to the determination of the investigators, the scars left in the hearts of Jan and Quiana's friends and families were cut too deep, leaving a void impossible to fill. "We give each other strength," Jan's mother said. In the aftermath, both families found solace in one another, sharing a tragic but powerful bond. As we remember their lives, may Jan and Quiana rest in eternal peace. We would like to extend our sincerest condolences to the families and friends of the victims. Jan and Quiana may have been long gone, but they shall never be forgotten. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications by activating the bell icon. By doing so, you'll never miss out on new content, and it really helps us make these videos. So, like, subscribe, and activate the bell. We appreciate your support.